This is 2021, the year in review. I'm Dennis Daly with a look at just a few of the major news items during the past 365 days. The year began with Congress trying to certify the election of Joe Biden. But on January 6th, the crowd of pro-Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. When the insurrection was over, it was found 4 had been killed. Later in the year, Congress launched a probe. Members of the GOP continue to try to stop it. Just days after the rioting, Joe Biden was officially sworn in. This particular inauguration was historic, not only because the transition of power was achieved despite efforts to destroy democracy, but because Kamala Harris became the first female vice president and the first person of African American and South Asian descent to hold that office. A freak winter storm showed up the vulnerability of the electric grid in Texas. Millions in the Lone Star State were left without electricity as a rare storm boosted demand and crippled distribution. Meanwhile, the Reliability Council of Texas, which manages the grid, called for rotating outages. The Texas mess showed that California wasn't the only state where the grid was vulnerable to extreme weather. By March, the international supply chain was showing signs of straining. A massive cargo ship with 18,000 containers ran aground in the Suez Canal. For 6 days, the vessel blocked the passage. Billions of dollars in goods started backing up around the world. In the U.S., the ports of Los Angeles were hardest hit as cargo was slow to be offloaded. By summer, millionaires had proved that if you have enough money, you can go to the edges of space. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Richard Branson all went on their own civilian rocket ship trips. Virgin Galactic began selling tickets for future flights. Blue Origin did the same. So far, nearly 1,000 tickets have been sold at undisclosed prices. Despite an awkward and deadly final week, on August 1, the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, following through on a deal reached during the Trump administration to end that 20-year war. More than half of Americans polled said they liked the idea. 40% said the exodus was handled poorly. By year's end, thousands of Afghan refugees still await being airlifted to safety. The renewed spread of different strains of the coronavirus led to changes in America's lifestyle. The opening of the Major League Baseball season was greeted by small crowds. By year's end, a new strain would start taxing healthcare systems again. There were flight disruptions. Many flights canceled over the holidays because employees were too sick to go to work. Among the biggest court cases of the year was the trial of Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. After deliberations without asking a single question, the jury convicted him in the murder of George Floyd. Vigils were held around the world. Later in the year, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on 5 sex trafficking charges in connection with wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein. In June, a Miami area high-rise condo collapsed. A grand jury eventually released a series of recommendations for condo safety after a deep examination. The collapse of the 12-story tower killed nearly 100. While the document avoided conclusions about what caused the disaster, it said there was an urgent need for sweeping reforms. In Texas, that state's conservative governor, Republican Greg Abbott, signed a bill banning most abortions after 6 to 8 weeks. The bill essentially makes any person in Texas opposed to abortion a licensed vigilante. The Supreme Court would later rule that abortion providers in Texas can sue, allowing them to go against at least a few state officials. Since the beginning of time, college athletes have been slaves to the system. their exploits used to raise millions of dollars with zero compensation. In many cases, they didn't even get a good education. That changed this year when the Supreme Court ruled that strict NCAA limits on compensating college athletes violate antitrust laws. That could have broad ramifications for the future. Part of President Biden's Build Back Better plan passed and was signed into law, the section dealing with roads and bridges and hardware. But by year's end, the second half dealing with human issues, such as child care and help for the elderly, was stonewalled by a single senator and most Republicans. It was a grim Christmas for many in a multi-state area, particularly Kentucky, racked by late-evening tornadoes. The worst hit was Mayfield. Tornado had crossed 11 counties. A major tornado tracked 165 miles. In Mayfield, a candle factory was decimated, but luckily fewer than 10 died there. But all told, nearly 100 lost their lives. It was not the worst of years and not the best, but it's over. I'm Dennis Daly.